Hey everyone, Carrie Beck here with Homeschool Coffee Break, where we help you stop the overwhelm so you can actually try to take a coffee break. Today we are here with Amy Roberts, and I was thinking right before we got on, I was like, I know we met. It must have been over 10 years ago online. We didn't see each other in person until, I don't know, the last 5 years. But I was thinking we sort of connected like it seemed like years ago. So I just really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us today, Amy.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, yes. Well, Amy has a very large family, and I know y'all, we are always getting questions about, I got all these kids, what do I do and how do I balance it? We're going to dive into some of that. But before we do, could you just tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm married to my high school sweetheart who happens to be an Army officer. He's a captain in the Army. And we have 10 children. He likes to say we had them the hard way, one wife, no twins. And so, yes, they are all ours. We're not a blended family, and we had them one at a time, no cheating, having twins. But we have been homeschooling from the very beginning. So our oldest is 26, our youngest is 7. And we have homeschooled since our oldest was a little over 4 because I was over ambitious and started in really early. And so, yes, we have been at this for over 2 decades now, homeschooling and just raising a larger than average family. And then somewhere in there, I started blogging about all of this. And so I blog at a website called raisingarrows.net. And it's based on Psalm 127:4 about arrows in the hands of a warrior. And so that is how it got its name. And I just blog there about all things large family homemaking and homeschooling.
Yes, she is a wealth of information, let me tell you. And honestly, I knew you had a lot of kids. I wasn't sure how many, but when we lived in Idaho for 4 years, my two best friends, and we moved back to Texas, and eventually now they're in Texas and Alabama. They each have 10 kids each. And so when I was like, we were around it a lot. They were the families. We would go to someone's house after church and spend all afternoon together. And there were plenty, and although a few of the kids by that time were grown and out of the house, but they both homeschooled and they had to manage everything. So, can you sort of like, before we dive in, maybe into some tips, just sort of give us a picture of what your day looks like?
Sure. So currently, I have quite a few of them still at home. I'm still homeschooling 5 of them. And then this summer, my 23-year-old is back from college. She is going to be going back to get her master's. And then she's also signing at a local school system. She's a sign language interpreter. And she's just here to kind of reset and go back. So she's here. My 19-year-old still lives at home as well. And then we also currently have my second oldest son and his family. So his wife and his son living with us too. And my mom is getting ready to move in with us. So there will be 5 generations in this house. I think that's right. Yeah. And so pretty crazy. But anyway, I guess it's 4, right? 4 generations. So,
Oh, yes.
um, anyway, so a typical day for us though is I get up and I kind of get everything together. And then we don't start homeschooling until 10 a.m. because I need to have time to have some coffee, get things, ready and just settled in my own brain. So we have always kind of taken a slow simmer morning. That's just how we operate. We're not morning people, we're night owls. And so I have tried to honor that rhythm, that natural rhythm in our family. So we homeschool from about 10 until 12, 12:30. The kids have independent schoolwork that they do and try to get finished there. We have our lunch. They have free time in the afternoon. We have various activities that we do together. We have family time together in the evenings. Once a week, we have a special night where one child is the special night kid and they get to choose the food and the drink and the things that we do that night. And it's just, I used to say it's like a zoo, but it's my zoo. So it's fine. My animals, my monkeys, my zoo, but it's a lot of fun. There can be some overwhelm, absolutely. But I think no matter how many kids you have, there can be overwhelm. And God gave them to me one at a time. So, as I added the next one, I just had to adjust to having one more child in the household. And so, yeah, we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of family traditions. We have a lot of things that is the glue that holds us together as a family. And I think that is incredibly important, that you build something with your family, that this is who we are. It gives them an identity, especially in the culture we're in today. Our kids need to have an identity that they associate with their home and family. And so that's kind of what it's like to be us.
That is awesome. I didn't know your mom was moving in too. That is like a lot. I'm like, you
It is.
know, just having my kids all here and going crazy over the weekends or whatever, it's fun because we got the great grandkids coming and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
so, okay, we could just sort of say Amy sort of has a crazy life. Same with all of us with homeschooling. So let's sort of break it down into different areas of your life and let's sort of look at the homemaking aspect. Then we'll move into the homeschooling. I know they sort of intersect a little bit,
Yeah.
but how do you manage? My kids kept wanting to eat 3 meals a day,
I
and then we
know.
needed to clean the house. So tell us some tips that you maybe ways that you do this with so many kids, and maybe some tips that our moms could take away.
Absolutely. So I am very big on systems and trying to make everything as autopilot as possible so that I don't have decision fatigue where I have to make a million decisions a day. And so anytime I run up against a problem in our household, something that's not working right, I will try to find a system that works for us. And so, for instance, laundry. Laundry has had to been revamped over and over and over throughout the years as we've added kids, taken away kids, different groups of kids are needing to wash things. And, especially we have like my 23-year-old is back. We've got to fit her into the schedule. So, what I have done over the years is just come up with different systems that work for us. And it also, we have moved 14 times. So, every single time you move house, you have to adjust systems as well. And so that is something that has been huge is just trying out things that I've found on the internet that I know other people are doing. And I will try them out, tweak them, adjust them, and then come up with something that works for our family. We have table chores after every meal because when you eat with a large family, there's a lot of dishes, there's a lot of food, there's a lot of everything. And we have chores that are assigned to individual children after every single meal. And those are posted up on the refrigerator. We have a weekly home blessing where we clean the house. And that didn't used to be something I could do. When my kids were all little, I had to adjust that. I had to adapt to what my family's current certain circumstances were. But now that they are older and I have more helpers, we can knock it out in one day. And it's semi-clean for the rest of the week. We also do tidy ups every single day. Before they can watch any TV shows, they have to tidy up the house because it's very quick to be undone. Pretty much everything in a large family, it doesn't take very long to undo everything you're doing. And you have to get to a place where you make peace with that and you realize that is just the nature of things. And so when you do the dishes, it's not going to be but a few minutes before there's dishes again. When you do the laundry, it's not going to be but a few minutes before there are laundry pieces again all over the floor and such. But having the systems in place gives you that peace of mind that when you get to that, you're going to get that all done. You're going to get that laundry done, and it's going to have like a rhythm and a rotation to it. And you don't feel so out of control then. And I am not actually a naturally organized person. I've had to become that way because I have this large family. And so it has really stretched me and grown me and challenged me as a homemaker. And I appreciate that. I actually feel like that's a gift from the Lord that I have been pushed and challenged in that way because I could very easily, I'm kind of an introvert and I kind of just like to sit and read my books. And if if God had left me alone and not given me all these children, I would have just sat and read myself, all day long, every single day. And instead, he challenged me to grow and, to continue that spiritual journey. And that's what giving these children to me has done. And so I don't think it's for everyone, but I think the Lord gives us exactly what we need.
That is so true, you know. And if he's giving you kids, whether there's one kid or 10 or more kids, God's giving you everything. That's all I was like, God's giving you everything you need for your family. Another thing you
Yes.
said in here, it changes over time, and you've got to find what works for your family. I
Yes.
mean, I share ideas. That's what worked for us. Y'all take and do whatever you want with it.
Right.
So,
It's good to learn from each other, but when we get hung up on so and so's doing it perfectly and I'm not, and if I just do what they're doing, it will work perfectly, we're going to end up with a big old mess because we're not honoring the family that God created us to be. And we have to really respect that and work with that.
so good. Okay, so we've talked about sort of taking care of the home, but we also said, they keep wanting to eat. So do you do all the cooking? Do you kids help? Well, how does that sort of look? Because seriously, my kids, I mean, I only had three, but sometimes they get up for breakfast and say, "What's for lunch?" And I'm thinking, we just had breakfast. Could we wait a few hours anyway? So tell us sort of how you handle all the meals and the food.
So again, this has changed over the years. When they were all little, yes, I was doing all the cooking, 3 meals a day plus snacks. I had a 30-day meal list that I would just work my way through. And I would make sure that I had those things on hand so that I could just pull them out of the refrigerator and make whatever I wanted to off the list. I've never been very disciplined when it comes to a meal plan. I still just write down ideas and then pull from those ideas throughout the week. Now, what we do now that they're older and they're going different directions, and there's not as many that I feel like I have to really pay attention to because the youngest is 7. They get up in the morning, they pretty much all make their own breakfast and their own lunch. I just make sure that I have what we need on hand. And then we do a bigger dinner at night. And sometimes I have help with that. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I put the 19-year-old in charge. Sometimes the 13 and 15-year-old boys are in charge. It just depends on what's going on in our life. But we do try to sit down every single dinner time and eat together. And that's how we're doing it now. But like I said, it has adapted and changed over the years. And when I had all little kids, I couldn't have done that. And I did have those situations where I'd have a child who would wake up in the morning, the toddler would wake up in the morning and I'd feed him. And then the older kids would straggle in and they would eat, and the toddler would want to eat again. And then you're like constantly feeding kids. And so, you kind of have to figure out what works for you, but having food and ingredients on hand has really been a big benefit for us because I know that there's always something in the house that we can put together, but I don't have like a very rigid meal plan.
I really like that. I tell people I love to cook. I like to cook breakfast and dinner. Lunch, oh, I just did not like lunch. So I don't know, I just kept a list of like 10 or 12 lunch ideas. And then it just depended on the day what we were eating. And then that also, I had some kids that did not like peanut butter and jelly. I had others that did not like macaroni and cheese. So, you're going to eat whatever you're going to eat. And you
Yeah.
might have to eat something that you don't like one day, the next day you get to eat something you do like, but you can't please everyone all the time.
No.
Um, okay, so let's sort of move into homeschooling. And you said you homeschool. I'm a morning person, so we did start a little bit earlier. I had a friend that was a night person, and they did all their homeschooling after dinner time. Oh, wait, I got to come back to this. You said that y'all do your own thing for breakfast and lunch, but you eat dinner together. And has that been difficult, like with your kids and your schedule? And sort of what does that look like? Because I have people going, "Oh, there's just no way." And I'm sort of like, y'all need to eat at least one meal a day together. So how did y'all sort of work through that? I'm a believer in it personally, but
Yeah. As a homeschool mom, I do try to be a little careful with this because you are at home with your kids most hours of the day. And so a lot of times when that advice is given that, make sure you eat 1 meal a day with your kids, that's a lot of times geared toward public school families who don't see their kids all day long. So I don't want anybody to feel guilty if they're not managing to eat together, but there is something about breaking bread together that is incredibly bonding and special. And I do encourage it because it's a different tradition that really pulls us together as a family. Yes, it can be difficult to do, especially as they get older. And there are times when I call the kids, I have a bell, a dinner bell. I ring the bell, whoever shows up, that's who's eating. And so some of the kids, they're at their job, they're out with friends. So, as they get older, that does change. Now, the 15 and under crew that I'm still homeschooling, that's not optional. You're not going to be out with friends. You're not going to be at a job. You are going to be home over the dinner hour. But when they get to be adults, I don't feel like I dictate that so much anymore. They do live here, but they live pretty separate lives. And so we have just tried to make sure that we have, something there to eat. And then we call everybody together. Like I said, whoever shows up is who shows up. And we try to sit down at the table together. We have a really huge table, and it's just a way for us to connect before the evening hours and just to chat through our day. It's just, again, it's a way to build those traditions and those connections as a family.
I I agree with it, and I agree too, because like we homeschooled, so we were eating breakfast and lunch. We were together all the time. There is something special about sitting down and, like you said, breaking bread. And I was talking to my son, this was 7 or 8 years ago, and we were talking about this, and I was going off to speak at a conference, and he sent me a picture of the book he was reading, and it said there are studies, and I have them written somewhere, that the number one factor, and it does lean more towards public school, but the number one factor of academic success is eating dinner together. It wasn't because there's just a bond that, like you said, and yes, I know we're homeschoolers and that does look different, but I just thought that spoke volumes about the importance of if it may be in dinner all the time, but there should be some time together. And I remember my kids, I mean, and when they were in sports, we ate at all different times. And it would be after, okay, mom, what time is dinner tonight? Because I sort of kept the schedule and we would eat at different times. And they knew, okay, dinner's at this time. So we have to be home from our friends or wherever. So just thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I do want to say too that as a large family, we limited our outside engagements. We had to just for my own stress level, but also for that family bond. It is very difficult if you are running 10 children here and there and everywhere to every sport and every event and every homeschool co-op even. It can be all good things, but it ends up taking away from the family. And so we were very, very careful and have been very careful over the years to make sure that the outside commitments we make actually build up the family rather than tear it down.
Yes, amen. I'm right on there with you. So I agree. Okay, so let's talk about homeschooling for a little bit.
Okay.
How did you juggle, whether people have 3 kids or 10 kids, they're still trying to figure it all out because they could be at different ages. And I was just talking to one mom. She had two grown kids, and now she's got a 5 and a 6-year-old and starting and doing it all over. So, what are some of the things that you did, or what are some tips that you could share with our moms?
So we meet together for a morning time at the top of our homeschool. We do Bible all together. We do our history and our fine arts and our geography all together. We are learning about the same time period in history, and then I assign literature from there that's at their level. And then they go off and they do their independent schoolwork, which is like their math and their science, which we could do science all together too. But I try to economize my time and make it as efficient as possible. And so the things that we can all do together so that I'm not going here and there, that's what we do together during morning time. And then I have outsourced like math. I use an online program for math. I'm not a math guru. I'm not good at that. And so I want somebody else to teach that. I want to spend my time and energy on the things I'm passionate about, which is history and fine arts. And so I want to do those things with my children, alongside my children, and then outsource the other things. And so that's really how I've tried to economize our homeschool so that I can get it all done. And it does not take as long as you think it's going to take. It's important to teach your kids to work independently. And it is important for them to own their work, to have responsibility when it comes to their actual lessons. And then for me to just be able to check in with them. That's what we have done over the years.
So one of the questions I get from moms is like, how do you get your kids to work independently? And like, okay, I understand a 5 or 6 year old, they can only do so much independently, but by the time they're up in their older years, they should be doing most everything independently. How do you sort of build that habit? Do you have any tips and ideas for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do something called the EDGE method. It's explain, demonstrate, guide, and enable. And so you explain math is a good example of this. So my 7-year-old has her math workbook, and I will go in and I will circle the problem she's supposed to do. And if it's a new concept, I will explain it to her. Then I will demonstrate it myself. I will write on her paper. I will show her. I will do maybe 2 problems, and then I will guide her through her doing the problems, me standing over her, her trying a couple of problems, me quickly, if she starts to go off track, me quickly bringing her back to where she needs to be. And that's me guiding her along in this. And then enabling her to work on her own. I walk away. I will not stand over her. I will give her a time frame that I'll be back, but I'm not going to stand there where she's like, Mom, what about this? What about this? Or, where she can throw a fit if she wants to or whatever. I'm walking away. I'll be back in 5 minutes. I expect 2 problems to be done or whatever it is, but I'm enabling her to do this on her own by walking away. And so that is what we have done. And we've just slowly worked up to it. My kids have a list of exactly what the independent schoolwork is. They work through the list. If we ever add anything, it goes onto the list. They each have figured out what order they want it to be in, and they work through it. And then I touch base with them a couple of times a week to make sure that it's being done.
Yeah, and one thing you said is they have a list. A lot of times moms, they think their kids know what they're supposed to do, but the kids don't have any idea of what is expected of them. And so I love this edge thing. And honestly, I never heard that. Explain, demonstrate, guide, and then enable, like walk away and let them work independently.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other word you use is ownership. I'm always like, if we don't let our kids take ownership on their education, they will never be independent on their own. They will always follow someone else.
Mhm.
And we really need them to follow God and then take ownership and leadership. So
Yes, one
that's
thing I
awesome.
am seeing in the colleges, because I've now graduated too from college, is that things have to be spoon fed to the kids in college. And I do not want to have to spoon feed my children, and I don't want them to grow up to need to be spoon fed. I want them to dig. I want them to learn how to learn. And part of that is walking away. Part of that is also tapping into their passions, the things that they're interested in. How can I infuse that into their lesson? So I have kids who are super interested in computers. I have done extra computer classes for them. And then a lot of times I will just let them figure it out. They can ask me, but I want them to dig. I want them to figure it out for themselves. And I don't want them to constantly be checking with me to tell them exactly what to do every step of the way. And this is just life skills kind of things that I'm seeing in the colleges. They don't have those life skills. And I think it's because the school systems have spoon fed everything to them, and they continue on into their college years as well.
That is so true. My middle daughter is 34 years old. And I remember in the middle of college, that was like 14 years ago. She's like, Mom, thank you so much for what you did in our homeschool. My friends were not ready for college at all. And she was the one having to show them how to study or manage their time because she had learned it. I mean, I'm like you, we did not spoon feed. They had to, I mean, you do teach them processes and you show them how they can read a
Yes.
book and understand and pull things out, but at the same time, they need to learn on their own as well.
Yes.
Um, Okay, we're going to take a little shift in what we're talking about. So that's the big homeschooling. But Amy has a little part of her story that I asked her if she would share with us. And I know that you've lost a child. I was just wondering if you could just tell a little bit of that story and how you've moved through it. I do know that we have moms here who have lost children, and that grief is real. And how tell us a little bit about what you walked through and then how you are able to be where you are today.
Certainly. So, our fifth child, Emily, was born in 2007 on the 4th of July. And, in my head, I thought I would always be telling her how the fireworks were for her birthday. But she did not make it to her first birthday. She got sick when she was about 5.5 months old. She had malrotation of the intestines, and so they were not connected to the wall and they twisted and died off. And she got very, very sick, and the surgeon resected some of her bowel. They had to go in and do it again. We thought she was on the mend. And then when she was 7.5 months old, she woke up one morning septic, and there was nothing we could do. In fact, she had this tiny little smile on her face and she was just staring off over my shoulder. And I thought, she's already got one foot in heaven. She just was not there anymore. And so, we are now, what, 16 years later.
Mm.
And it did not steal my joy, because my joy is in the Lord and He walked us through it. He sent people into our lives who had also lost children and who walked that road alongside us. And, in my grief, the only place I could turn was to the Psalms. And I could read one psalm a day. That was it. I could barely get through that because my heart was just broken, but David's heart was broken all the time too. And so you would see in these psalms this broken man who then turned it around to praise by the end of the psalm. And so that got me through. I had friends who would call just to tell me to put cereal on the table so that the kids could eat. So I had friends who were walking alongside me, and my husband and I drew very close to each other because we went through this together. And when he was having a really hard time, I was doing okay. And when I was having a hard time, he was doing okay. So we leaned on each other, and we just, walked it out. People talk about moving on. You don't move on, you move forward. And so we moved forward slowly but surely. And there are still times, when it just hits me. There's something I see, there's something I hear, and you just kind of fall apart. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think about her. I see her in all the family pictures because I know she's missing. And maybe nobody else knows that, but I do. And several years ago, I ran into a woman who had lost her son 30 years prior. And of course, at that time, I think we were probably 3 years out. And 30 years, I was like, oh, wow. And she told me that's the first thing when she gets to heaven. She hopes she sees him first. And she was thinking about that 30 years later. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. Well, I can attest to it. 16 years later, that's what you think about. But I also would walk the cemetery where she's buried, and I would look for graves of children who had passed away young, like she had. And then I would look for their parents because I wanted to see that they had survived. I wanted to see that they made it through and that they kept living. And they did. And that gave me great hope to know that, I had 4 other children at the time and then went on to have 5 more kids, and I needed to keep living. And so Emily is very much a part of our lives. We talk about her all the time. We share stories all the time. Even the ones who never met her are well, acquainted with their sister. And so she's still very much a part of our lives. But I also take into account the verses that talk about comforting with the comfort that God has given you. I believe that's in Second Corinthians. And God gave me that comfort, and now I get to share that with others. I get to share the comfort of the Lord with others. And it is hard. Grief is hard. Even when you've walked through it yourself, to share with someone else and to help someone else through their grief, you just don't always know what to say. And we have a situation right now in our church where there's a family walking through some awful things. And I was telling people, grieving people don't know what they need. Everybody asks, well, just let me know if you need something. What do you need? They don't know. They don't know. And 9 times out of 10, what they really need is for you to just show up, for you to just be there. They don't need you to say anything. They just need you to be there. I noticed every single person who came to her funeral. We stood at the front of that church as people walked in, and I took note of every single person who was loving on us that day. And it meant so much to me. And so often that's all grieving people need, is they just need you to show up. They need you to speak that child's name, because they don't want anybody to forget. They want to remember. They want to share that. A lot of people are afraid to say Emily's name or to talk about things. No, I want to talk about it. I miss her, but she is a part of my life, and I don't want to ignore that she existed. And so that's just my admonition to people, is if you know someone who is grieving, just show up for them. Ask them questions, listen to their stories. Don't be afraid of them. And if you are a grieving person, know that there is comfort in the Lord. Know that there are other people who have walked through this. You are not alone, and you are loved.
That is awesome. I love the phrase show up. I read a book and the main thing was show up. And then I read Laura Blessing, I think that's her name, her story about when her husband had brain problems and everything and was in the hospital like a year after they got married. And she said her favorite people that came didn't come to preach to her or say whatever. They would bring a latte and they would just sit right next to her. And just that physical being of someone right there. And I mean, she was in the depths of grief at the
Mm.
moment. And, they are further along and she's had kids since then and all, but still. And the other thing I really appreciate you saying is don't be afraid to talk about that person. I don't know why I've gotten teary just listening to you, but my 24-year-old niece died about 8 years ago. And I remember that she and I would talk about the Houston Texans because she liked football. And my brother didn't really care about football. And I just remember afterwards, I would say, tell them stories every once in a while during the next few years about, oh, I remember Anna saying this, the other thing, I remember Anna wanting my jalapeno popper recipe, and we'd start talking about it
Yeah.
because someone had told me exactly what you said. Don't be afraid to talk about them because they don't want to be forgotten at all. So, okay, I will try to get control of myself. I know people, you never know what you're going to get here. Oh, and then the last thing, joy in the Lord.
Yeah.
The joy in the presence of the Lord is joy, and the joy of the Lord is our strength. And I just had a pastor say that, and that's the thing. Psalms will just take them through so much. And I
Yeah.
know I'm just repeating what you said, but just hearing it all over again was so encouraging. And I do know that there are moms, whether they're walking in grief over a death in their family, or a death of a relationship, or changes, or who knows, whatever they're walking through, grief is real. So,
And
anyway,
I want to share too. I have a free resource on the blog called Psalms for the Grieving Heart. And I walk through those very Psalms with questions to ask yourself, and just one a day for 30 days. And it
mhm.
was a resource that I just wanted to be able to give other moms, because it had helped me so much to walk through those Psalms like that and to ask myself those difficult questions. And so that resource is free on the blog, and I'm sure you'll have a link for that so that people can get that.
Oh, definitely. That sounds good. Okay. Well, here, then we're going to sort of close here, but tell us a little bit about where people could find you and if any other resources that you'd like to share. And we will put links to whatever she shares
Okay.
in the show notes.
So yes, the blog is raisingarrows.net, and that's where I have been for the past 17, 18 years. And I also have a YouTube channel and a podcast where I talk about large family homeschooling and homemaking. They're all by the same name. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. But those are kind of my main places. And the podcast I release a couple of times a month, and the videos are about like that as well. But the blog itself is kind of the main big resource because I've been there for so long that there's a lot of information. There's grief resources, there's homeschooling resources, there's homemaking resources. And so that's where I'm at.
That is awesome. Thank you, Amy. So if you had to like start all over again, is there any, everyone wants to ask this question. I mean, you really have gone through 11 kids. And that's another question that's so hard is when people say, how many kids do you have? And it's sort of like, well, how you've got 10 living and you have one up in heaven as
Well,
well.
actually, I have 10.
They have more because you have miscarriages.
Yes, but I have 9 living. I always count Emily in the 10.
Oh,
Always. So, yeah.
thank you. I never know because I have asked people that question, not even knowing their history. Like you just meet them and then they say something. And I know my sister-in-law, 7 and 8 years, especially how do I answer that question? So thank you because I just think that is so important.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I just go ahead and say it, and I figure if they wanna do the math and be like, "Wait a second, she has 5 at home and she's graduated 4 and that's only 9," then you
yeah,
can ask me, but a lot of people don't ever do the math, so I'm like, "You know what? I have 10 children, and I held them all and nursed them all, and
yes,
they're my babies." So no,
they are.
there's just one of them running up ahead a little further.
Yes, paving the way for y'all as well. So is there anything that you would do differently if you were to like start all over again, whether that's parenting, homeschooling, or anything?
Honestly, I am nostalgic at heart, and I would just
Oh,
do it all over again to do it all over again. I don't know that I would change anything. I would just do it so that I could relive it. And I wonder if that's why I had so many kids, so I could just keep reliving it. I have enjoyed it so, so much. And there's been hard times, obviously, but I really feel like the Lord has just set that path in motion, and who am I to say that I would do something differently?
yeah, so good. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for being here with us. Thank you for sharing so many words of wisdom for our homeschool moms. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Carrie.
All right, and carry back homeschool coffee break. We'll talk to you next time.